Welcome back to the Running Explained podcast. Hi, I'm Coach Elizabeth, and I'm here to break down the science of running in a way that actually makes sense. Whether you're training for your very first race, aiming for a new PR, or just trying to be a more balanced runner, this podcast is your go-to spot for all things running. At Running Explained, running is more than just about logging miles. It's about becoming the best version of you. That's why we talk about more than just improving your fitness, but how to support your physical, mental, and emotional health too, so you'll see improvements that go far beyond race times. And if you're looking for more support, I've got you covered. Whether you're interested in one-on-one coaching, following a structured training plan, or joining our supportive group coaching, I've got options to meet you where you are and help you level up. Ready to dive in? Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Running Explained podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Parker and Meredith Root of Tactic Nutrition to have a conversation about something that I think a lot of runners struggle with, and that is embracing your identity as a multi-sport athlete. In this conversation, we talk about how and why incorporating more than just running, whether that's running and strength training or triathlon or CrossFit or high rocks or cycling or swimming, or really, you get the picture, it can be like anything else, is not just beneficial, but can be actually helpful for your long-term health, strength, and performance across those multiple disciplines. Whether you're stuck in feeling like, well, I'm just a runner, so I can only run mindset, or you're actively looking to understand how to incorporate running into all the other sports that you also enjoy doing, we'll explore how adding this kind of variety to your training throughout the year can help you stay motivated, prevent injuries, and improve your overall fitness. Now, the biggest question that multi-sport athletes usually face is, but how do I do it all at the same time? And the answer is, you don't. And we'll talk all about how to find that kind of balance in this episode, along with so many other things. Let's dive in. Alex and Meredith, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's get started. Obviously, with two guests, I always have to say, you go first. Now you go first. So let's get started and start with alphabetical order and have you introduce yourself. So Alex, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
This question's always so difficult. I feel like there's so much because I'm 35, but I would say I am, I guess, born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, and we live in Fernie, BC, so a little mountain town now. I did a variety of different sports growing up and ended up focusing on ski racing in the end, and then found CrossFit, and then have kind of shifted away into more endurance sports. For work, I'm actually a lawyer, but I didn't like where that career was heading in terms of work-life balance. So now Meredith and I own a nutrition coaching consulting company and a fitness company together. So that's kind of, I guess, as succinct as I can make my history and my current being.
I love it. And we'll dive into more of that in the episode. Meredith, your turn.
Yeah, like Alex, there's a lot. I'm an engineer. That's what I went to school for. So worked in biotech and biopharmaceutical development for about 6 years, and then took a year off to dabble in professional CrossFit. That's where Alex and I met. And my intention was always to go back into that career because I had that job kind of waiting on me. But then as life happens, because we met, I ended up moving to Calgary, and there's not a huge biotech presence in Calgary. It's more of a oil and gas place, which I didn't want to work in that industry. So, was doing some nutrition coaching on the side at that point, and, found a tactic as, something that we were both really interested in doing, but also for me, it was definitely a necessity because I didn't have a clear career path living in Canada versus living in the US. So that's what we've been doing. And it's kind of grown some legs. I mean, we have a big team that we work with. We have like 12 coaches. And obviously like the media side of things has really taken off. So I'd say most people know us from our social media channels and presence there. And a lot of people don't even realize that really like what we do to make money is we coach people and we help people build better relationships with food. We help athletes, improve their performance with nutrition and lifestyle factors and stuff like that. And then we try to provide as much valuable information as we can online for free, which works as an amazing like funnel to our businesses, but also just feels really good to like be a positive influence on people.
So I know one of the things with your, I mean, I follow obviously Tactic and then you individually on Instagram. One of the things that I think is most interesting about what you guys do and how you communicate is, and I think you addressed this in a video a little while ago, is that when you don't really talk about like nutrition very often. Like you're not out there saying this is, this is how you carb load, this is how you fuel after, a multi-hour run or ride. You're talking about like an entirely different side of the sport that is almost about our approach and how we think and feel about things. But it's not a lot of eat this, do that. When did that start to happen? Was that an intentional choice that you made, that was just not going to be the focus of what you talked about?
Yeah, I think that kind of came from working with people, and you see what the sticking points really are and then what people get really distracted by. And so the more you work with people, the more you realize like the details don't really matter that much, and it's not science, it's not information that compels most people. Um, it's progress. It's actually like sticking to something. So it means the most impactful way to um, you know, influence change in someone's life isn't, yeah, you need to eat this within 30 minutes after a run or a workout. It's literally just like getting them to do a pretty okay job for like 6 months, 12 months. I think the mistake that a lot of people make, especially beginners or people who are new at doing whatever it is they just, they go a little too hard at first, or they get lost in the details, or they get distracted. And getting someone to be really consistent and persistent with what they're doing is kind of where progress is made. And so that's what caused us to pivot our messaging kind of early on.
Well, I think it's very effective. I mean, I'm out there bookmarking everything you put out. I'm like, oh, that's another good one.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I have a couple rapid fire questions before we get into kind of the meat of our discussion today. So we'll take it one question at a time and have you both answer for not like one, go through each question each time. So my first question, again, let's start with alphabetical order. So Alex, you're up first. My first question is, if you could have a guaranteed entry, all expenses paid race anywhere in the world, I mean, any sport in the world, what would it be?
To compete in?
Or to participate in, yeah.
I would probably pick the New York City Marathon. That's on my bucket list. I'm a little bit deterred by the difficulty of getting in. I haven't tried yet. And then, of course, just the cost of traveling to New York City. So it would be great to just have like the best experience and do that race and just get the full package.
Yeah, smooth all the speed bumps.
Mm-hmm.
Meredith, what about you?
I would do. There's a gravel race called the Great Migration Gravel Race that's in Kenya. So I would probably do that one. It's not running. You could run it, I guess, but that would be probably my bucket list ride. Would be a gravel race.
So tell us about that race.
It's multi-day, so it goes like the Great Migration is a migrational pattern that water buffalo and zebra and basically all these plains animals in Africa follow. And it occurs usually in like September. And so the gravel race itself follows that same route. Part of it. It doesn't do the whole thing because it's a massive migration. But yeah, just the idea of being able to like ride a bicycle in a desert in Africa is crazy to think about, and people do it. So
that's amazing. Is it self-supported? Like, are you carrying everything with you then when you cross the start line?
No, there. I think it's semi-supported, so you would carry some, but there's aid stations and stops and things like that, and obviously, like they have guides along the way because there are animals that will eat you, so there has to be some support besides just what you can carry on your bike.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds like a fun one. All right, next question. So, what is, and we're talking about intra event fuel, so run fuel, bike fuel. What is your favorite fuel of the moment?
I really like Scratch Super Carb.
But I also really like Fig Newtons for biking, but not for running. I can't chew and run. It's hard to breathe. So I usually go with fluids for running, and then my intra biking, I'll do Fig Newtons.
Do you mix your scratch in a specific, because one of my favorite fuels is essentially goo roctane powder, which is like the goose version of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to play with the concentrations depending on kind of what I'm trying to do. How do you mix it? Do you go straight by the directions? Do you customize it? How do you like it?
I customize it based on the run. So, and I use a variety of different carb supplements because I just like to not be super specific with things. I would say that's my favorite because I can make it really, really concentrated and it not impact like my stomach, and it doesn't taste super, super sweet. So with some carb supplements, it's like you make, 20 grams of carbs in 3 or 4 ounces, and it's so, so sweet. But if I'm running a race and I'm, at a race where I can have my own water bottle, I like to be able to grab the water bottle, get in like 30 grams of carbs, but not have to consume 8 ounces of fluid while I'm doing it. But if I'm just out for like a training run and I leave a water bottle on the side of the road or something, I might make it not as concentrated. So I definitely play around with it.
I love the flexibility there. Meredith, what about you? What's the fuel of the moment?
Well, I have to take credit for the Fig Newtons because I think that infatuation that Alex has came from me last year. From a like solid food standpoint, definitely Fig Newtons because they're super low fat, which I think they might actually be like a zero fat food. I can't remember. Yeah. So great to have on the bike or at aid stations. As far as liquid carbs, probably Gnarly Nutrition, Fuel 2.0, and kind of the same thing. It's lightly flavored, so it's not a super sweet carb. I like scratch. For me, I have like some issues with fructose when I have a lot of it, so I have to watch that, especially if I'm doing like mixed carb sources and gels. If I start hammering myself with fructose and fluids, I tend to get a little bubbly. So yeah, I do gnarly, and then for gels, I like the Never Second gels a lot. And it's for me, it's a high volume gel, so it's isotonic, so you don't have to worry about taking a concentrated gel and then having to drink something with it, so that you don't upset your stomach. And again, it's like lightly flavored, so I have a real aversion to sweet things. Like the further into an endurance event I get, so the lighter the flavor, the better for me typically.
This is totally off topic already. Somebody was commenting the other day on a post I did that they like to get some of their electrolytes in using soy sauce packets during races. And of course, there was a bit of like people are like, whoa, that's intense.
Yeah.
And that made me think a lot of people, their kind of aversion to fueling is not, it's the aversion to sweet fatigue, right?
Yeah.
By the time you're 2, 3, 4 hours in, you're like, I do not want any more of this sugar thing, but I know I need it. And so we were talking about how if you can handle it and it works for you, there are ways to break that up with some other elements. And this one person was deciding to use soy sauce packets for that.
Yeah, 100%. It would be interesting if they could market, because like it seems to me like savory carb sources are often like pretzels. It's like your dry carbs, like super dry. Like I don't know if you've ever eaten a pretzel at like 3 or 4 hours into a race, but it doesn't go down. Like
Meredith suggested I take pretzels in between my bike and run transition for the half Ironman that I did. So I put them in my bag. I looked at them in the transition and was like, absolutely not. I couldn't even eat one of those and without it just sitting in my mouth for the entirety of the run.
but you don't know what you're going to want, so you may as well have it.
I definitely did not want a pretzel. That's worse than like a Nutri-Grain bar.
Where's the market for like gel, like savory gels? I guess mashed potatoes, but put it in a packet.
What else is there? Carbs. I mean, for like savory carbs, it's pretzels.
Yeah.
I mean, like boiled potatoes, rice balls,
potato chips.
But that's like, but like a
too much
low
fat.
Yeah.
They make gels now that are unflavored. So like that could be there's like a goo one that I tried, and I think it's called like natural or something, and it has no flavor, which is kind of nice. It's kind of like the flavor of water after running. You're like, oh, it's just plain. It's nice.
Is it I haven't tried that one yet. Is it unflavored the way that Martin is unflavored? Because Martin just tastes like sugar water to me. Like it literally tastes like I put sugar in water.
I've never had Morton, but the natural goo I find to be pretty flavorless. It's just like, but goo is also on the like extreme end of flavor, I find. I like goo. That's my favorite one. I actually find it less sweet than Never Second.
I
And
like it when some of the high salt flavors, like the rock, like the lemonade. Lemonade's awesome.
Limeade. Yeah, they have a limeade. That one's good.
Salty
I always do
watermelon.
citrus. Yeah.
Do you change your fuel seasonally? Right. I mean, in terms of flavors, I'm just curious because chocolate can sound really good when it's, below freezing, but then it's July and you're thinking I would rather do anything else than eat a chocolate flavored anything on a run.
I did the chocolate coffee vanilla kind of flavor profile for my first race back, like my first marathon, which was I guess like 4 years ago now, and I can't do it again. So now I just stick with the like fruit ones, and I don't get really any palate fatigue. I don't use gels a ton outside of races or like builds, because I can find they can get to be a lot.
I love that. I mean, I obviously this is what part of your business is, but I also like to talk about this to normalize all the different ways that we can use fuel and our preferences. I think, and you obviously know this, for some people, they understand the concept of how important fuel is, but they hit a roadblock and none of the normal, quote unquote, normal options are working for them. So they kind of give up, right? Think it's just not for me. And then to say, well, there are some other options. We just might have to get creative here. And maybe it is pretzels, or maybe it is, unflavored gels or whatever. It works best for them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many options out there. It's nuts. So you don't like we have tons of all the gnarly flavors, and then we have a bunch of other brands. If, gnarly doesn't carry something that we like, it's nice to be able to go into the drawer and be like, what am I in the mood for? Because you do need variance, just like with regular food.
Yeah. Variety. All right, last question. So this is a question about running shoes specifically, although if either of you feel like, you have another piece of equipment that would better fit this, let me know. So my final question is, what is your all-time favorite pair of running shoes that you've ever had? Like the holy grail shoes?
Probably the Saucony Endorphin Speed. And they still like make them, and I think they're at the 4th iteration. And I've liked all the iterations. I think I've had 2, 3, and 4. But I know what Meredith's going to say.
Because I wore them today.
They're discontinued, unfortunately. The ones Meredith is going to say, but
yeah,
and they are.
My favorite shoe is the Saucony Freedom 5 or Freedom 4. So they made this shoe for, obviously like 5 iterations, and then they made it for a 6th iteration, but they changed it into more like a training shoe, like a mixed modality CrossFit kind of shoe. But the Freedom 5 is a 4 mil drop shoe. So it's the speed I think is an 8, which is more traditional, but it uses that same foam. So it uses a really high end foam. But it's a fairly light shoe, like low profile, not all the way to a flat, but a really minimal shoe, which I like, and super light, just like a great everyday trainer. They feel good to work out in if you have to do that, but they're amazing to run in. But they're so expensive for what they are because that foam. So I think that they were probably, my guess, I don't know, they were probably losing sales to the Endorphin Speed, which is like probably is my number 2 shoe. And so we have a friend who works for Saucony, and she knows that I really love the shoe, and so she basically was like, "Hey, we're going to be discontinuing the Freedom. You may want to like stockpile." So I have stockpiled Freedoms. So I have like some new pairs. I have
closet full of Freedoms.
they're the best. You can still get them online too for super, super cheap. But if you don't like the stack height of the Speed, because sometimes I don't want that, it's a really good option.
Listeners, if you run in the Saucony Freedom, take note. You got to go buy it because it's going away. I ran in the Freedoms like a couple years ago. I picked up a pair, and it's interesting what you said with the price point, because I always thought that they were in the scheme of how they were, pairing their shoes. Like I always thought that the Freedom, kind of like the higher end, more performance version of the Kinvara. But it always kind of seemed like it was like, what is this? Shoe doesn't really belong. Like it's here and it's in their lineup, but like I don't know what purpose it's supposed to serve.
Yeah.
But I'm bummed they're discontinuing it since it's your favorite.
It's like it doesn't have the speed roll and it doesn't have a plate. So I think people are like, oh, I'll just go with the endorphin or the Kinvara, which is was in before the Kinvara had a plate. It was a good option to the Freedom, so because it was cheaper,
but also harder foam.
Yeah. They're putting plates in everything now. I just picked up because I wanted to try them, a pair of the Nike Zoom X, like the carbon plated trainer, which I feel like, I know, I'm thinking that's what they're marketing. I think they're marketing as like a carbon plated trainer. I don't know if that means a daily trainer, because I know some people are going to do all their stuff in carbon plates, even if we tell them, hey, switch it up, please don't do that. And so I'm just more curious to see kind of what this shoe does and how it differs from a different type of carbon plated shoe, right? You never know until you try.
Yeah.
I know you like the Speed, so that's a nylon plate. Do you run in carbon plated shoes?
I do. I run in Nike Alpha Fly for races. It's funny. I actually ran because I did the half Ironman. I put them on the new iteration for the race, and the running portion was in a golf course on pathway. So it was a lot of like windy up and down. And I just hated them for that. I'm like, I just need to be on a straight road with these shoes because the stack height's so high. They're not the most stable. So I was saying to Meredith, like, if I ever did that race again, because of the way that the course is, I would probably do the Speeds or the Endorphin Pros. So you still get the carbon plate, but you don't get the like giant stack height and the lack of stability. But yeah, I only run in carbon plates for races, and then I'll do 1 to 2 training runs at pace leading up to the race, just so I'm used to what the shoe feels like. But I don't train in them. They jack up my calves and they don't really feel comfortable. So I'm like, I can do all my paces in Speeds and then, or the Kinvaras. And then when I put on the carbon plate, I'm like, oh, okay, this is nice. I don't want to get used to the carbon plate, because then it's not like, it doesn't feel extra fast on race day.
Yeah, it doesn't feel special.
Yeah.
I was about to say that's when you're taking corners at speed in high stack shoes, it feels dangerous. You're like, am I gonna wipe out here?
Yeah. It was like a sandy part. I'm like, I'm not. These are not good. And there's no grip either. I once ran like a rainy course. It was raining for one race I did, and I was like, this isn't great. These are not great for like wet pavement either. It wasn't bad, but it was like, yeah, you realize you're compromising some stability and some grip with those shoes for sure.
Very specific shoes for a very specific purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today I really wanted to talk about this idea of being a multi-sport athlete. And obviously this is a show about running. It's called the Running Explained podcast. Most of the people who listen to this show are predominantly identify as runners as their main sport. But I have found that the running space can feel like it can feel exclusionary in terms of, if you're not all in, if you dare to do any other sport, you're somehow not as serious or as committed, or whatever it is. There's this weird, like, you have to be only a runner if you're going to be a runner. But we know that's not true. We know you can be an athlete who does a variety of sports, and running can be one of them. So I wanted to get your take one by one on the evolution that you have felt about being a multi-sport athlete, if you have struggled with identifying away from your primary sport, right? So Alex starting off and being a competitive skier, right? And how if you was a conscious thought process to be somebody who engages in multiple types of sports. Just kind of free flowing, things that come to mind.
I think with my background in sport, because I did so much variety and it depended on the season. So I was really into golf, and then skiing was my winter sport. And then soccer was kind of like the fall, summerish sport as well. With skiing specifically, the way that dryland was for me, at least in the club that I was in, you were doing so many different things to get trained for skiing, because you have to have strength. You do have to have a level of endurance, even though you're your runs are only a minute or two because you're doing so many. You need to be in shape. So we would do like bike sprints, long bike rides. We would run as a group. We would do sled pushes. We would do strength. Like I did, we would play soccer. We'd play basketball. We would do slack line. Like we would just, you're balancing on Bosu balls. There's so much variety in the training. And I think that combined with being, obsessed with sports growing up, I was always a multi-sport athlete. And then when I did start focusing solely on skiing, when I was in, so I was finishing up grade 12. So I was like 18. I put all my eggs in one basket and skied only, and kind of got tired of that. That thing happens for me where you turn sport or something really fun into work. I lose interest in it. Like, I don't like to do sports with a lot of external pressure. So like pressure, like you have to perform to stay on the team or get funding or something like that. It ruined it for me. So I ended up going on a ski scholarship and skied collegiately for 4 years. And that's when I kind of found running during that time. And that was because my sister, she got really into running. My dad he was a 2:30 marathoner. So, and my mom ran a few marathons, not as fast. But we're kind of a running family. So my sister got into running. She was like, I'm going to do this half marathon. And so we did it. I think I was 19 or 20. I was in college, and she ran it like in 150, and I did it 2 hours. And I was like, this is brutal. I just like didn't have the like endurance coming from ski racing. And so I guess this is a long explanation, but I've been a multi-sport athlete my entire life. And then that's kind of how I started getting into running. And when I picked up CrossFit at the end of university, when I quit ski racing, because that was kind of the end of it and I was tired of it, CrossFit was just my like new athletic and competitive outlet. And I picked up that really fast. And then during that, I had found this love for running through my sister and my family. So I was running and doing CrossFit just recreationally. And then when my sister passed away from cancer, unfortunately, she had this goal of running the San Francisco Marathon when she like recovered from cancer. And the reason for that is because it's the Nike Women's Marathon, and you get a Tiffany's necklace when you cross the finish line from a firefighter. So for her, she had nice taste and really liked Tiffany's. So that was the call for her. So we as a family did a big fundraising thing to do that marathon. And that's when I kind of really fell in love with marathoning, I guess, or running and training for something. And then I got really, really into CrossFit. So I wasn't training for anything specific with running, but because I just loved it so much, I ended up going to law school, and I would run every morning before school simply because it was something that I really enjoyed. And it was a great way to just kind of clear my mind before school. And then it was also a bit of a coping mechanism for like dealing with my grief. Exercise was definitely my outlet to a degree where maybe on some level it got a little bit unhealthy. And then that all just culminated into kind of getting into CrossFit very, very competitively, still running. And then as I exited CrossFit, running was kind of the fallback. So in terms of identity, I don't really ever feel like I'm not a runner or I'm just a CrossFitter. I've always just done both. And I do feel like running is the ultimate fitness. It translates over into everything. And even now, like I do functional fitness training 2 to 4 times a week. And then I'm running 3 to 5 times a week. And I feel like if you can manage everything from a scheduling standpoint, you can maintain a lot of strength or build strength and still be a really fast runner. And that's anecdotal, but I also see it happening in other areas for people or with other people who are able to do both and are, I guess, persistent enough in maintaining and building strength and also having a really good running program. So yeah, that's kind of like my history with running and everything. But I do think that, running is just the ultimate fitness, and it can be a really, really good base for everything else. So yeah. Sorry,
Did
that
you
was
ever? No, it's great, and I love the evolution, of being more involved in one thing and then being more involved in another thing. Did you experience any pressure when you were more committed to one sport over the other that you should like be like, oh no, why are you doing that other thing? You should probably focus more on this. Like, if you were skiing, people are like, why do you run so much? If you're doing CrossFit, why do you run so much? If you're running, why do you do CrossFit? Like, why aren't you running more? Like, did you ever experience that?
I did. So I experienced it a little bit. I got to the CrossFit Games in 2015, and then I wanted to go back. And so I took a year off of pursuing my career in law and was all in CrossFit. And so I stopped running because despite what I've said, there is a point at which if you're trying to build strength and power, running is kind of a little bit at odds with that, especially long distance running. So if you want to go one extreme, you kind of have to give up that other fitness area. Um, and so there was pressure from my coach and for based on my goals. Like he's like, here are your goals. This is what you have to do. So I did that. And I did get stronger and I did get better at the sport that I was pursuing. Um, and then now where I'm at, so I recently I've run a few sub 3 hour marathons. And it's kind of gotten to the point with my running where I feel like there's potential for me to get faster. But at the same time, I think for me to do that, I would have to sacrifice even more strength. And I really like the balance of where I'm at now. Like I still feel very strong and very resilient, but I can still run quite fast for me. And I think objectively. And that's kind of why I've started pursuing Ironman, because I can kind of maintain my running speed, maintain my strength, and just build in some more biking and swimming just for variance instead of kind of maintaining strength and kind of maintaining the same running potential, I guess, because I've kind of, at least I feel like I've come to a bit of a head with that.
That's really interesting. And Meredith, I definitely want to talk, about your history next. But one thing I also want to ask is based on what you just said, that concept of choosing not to chase your, potential to the fullest, choosing not to, saying I probably could, but that's not what I'm going to do. It feels like it goes a bit counter to what we are typically taught in that, you should always follow through to the very end. You should always see how far you can go with things, right? If you think you could do better, you should try to do better. And you're saying, I mean, I probably could do better, but based on everything else I have going on, I'm not interested necessarily in what that would take.
Yeah, like I don't necessarily want to be running 100 kilometers a week. I like running 60 or 70 and then being able to go to the gym and lift. And this is, I don't want to poo poo people who really, really love running and are focusing solely on that. But I do think that strength training for longevity is so important and maintaining muscle mass, especially as a woman, is really important. And I don't want to give that up for, a 250 marathon or 240 potentially if I really, really, try for the next 5 years. So yeah, I think there's this, I like the phrase, like, people you shouldn't should yourself like, oh, you should try to get faster. You should do this. It's like, I don't look at what it would feel like to run a 240. I think about what the path to get there would be. And for me, I look at my weekly training and I don't really want that to change. So I like the balance. And it's kind of nice to run a sub 3 and say like, oh, you know what, I can't run a sub 250, but I can squat a lot more than those people. It's like a nice compromise for me.
I like that. I don't think a lot of people look at the path. They look at the outcome and they say, I want to get there. And they don't think about what it would take to get there. So that's a really, hopefully, interesting way that some of our listeners can maybe ponder on what it would take to reach some of those big goals. Meredith, tell us about your relationship with sport as a multi-sport athlete.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Alex, I grew up doing a lot of different sports. Like I had my primary sport. I was did a lot of swimming. That was kind of number one. And then did everything else like soccer. I ran, like I was a runner when I was a kid. I ran cross country at like I was decent at it. I wasn't winning anything. I did track and field, but in addition to running with track and field, I also I did field events. I pole vaulted. I did high jump. I did just dabbled. And I always really, really liked that as a kid, even though, um, the thing that I was putting the most time in, was one sport, and it was swimming. I really like to play. And so that's something that I've really carried into adulthood. The only time that I ever only ran was after university. I took a PE every single semester in college also. So I did like 8 PEs because I was like, well, this is how I play in university. Like most people just did their mandatory 2 and then that was it. But I was like, I did springboard diving. I did 2 semesters of tennis. I did um, bowling. Like I just did all these different things because I just find that really fun. So that's kind of like in my DNA. But yeah, so I exclusively ran for a few years after college, and that was the only time, and it was just because I didn't know what else to do. Swimming wasn't an outlet that was easy to pursue. I didn't have a gym membership, didn't really want to do triathlon, so I got into running, and I like it. I like endurance sports, but it was just getting kind of boring. And after that is when I found strength training. I found CrossFit, and I have to tell you, when I started squatting again, like when I started moving my body in that way, I was in so much pain, and I was in my early to mid 20s at that point, like a time when you should not be in that much pain. Like I thought that I was gonna have to quit doing CrossFit because my knees hurt so bad.
My hips were so tight from running so much and then
Mhm.
squatting that I would lie in bed and my hips would just ache.
Mhm.
I'm like, this isn't good.
Yeah. But I also at that time I didn't know it was gonna get better. So I really was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do here. But over time, the more I moved and the more I got into it, the better it got. I didn't deal with constant pain anymore. And then I just, I excelled at running within the sport of CrossFit. Like I always really excelled in those workouts, but also got really strong and, took a 2-year period where I competed nationally in Olympic weightlifting. So I've always just been this person who's going to do different things. And then like Alex, got really into the CrossFit side of things, competed at a really high level there. And, in 2018, which is the same year that I qualified and competed at the CrossFit Games, I ran a half marathon that June on no training because Alex, at that point, I hadn't received my invite to the games because I got a backfill spot. So I didn't think I was going. And I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself. And so Alex was like, well, let's run this half marathon. It's in a month. You have plenty of time to prepare. And it was actually the next weekend. So I had no time to prepare.
I had confused the months of June and July.
Yeah. It was like, we'll be good for it. We'll just go and run it easy. We don't have to do anything. But we don't do anything easy. So having never ran longer than probably a 10K before, I just ran this half marathon and I ran it like a 1:36. So that was like my first half marathon ever on no volume really at all. Did I collapse an arch? I did do that. But I ran it in, I don't know if you remember the old Addy Zeros, the Bostons, back when people were still running in flats. Well, I had a pair of those. So I was like, why not? We'll just run it in flats. My feet did not appreciate that decision. But yeah, ever since then, we retired from the sport of CrossFit. And again, this is kind of like the running thing. People, when we pulled back from that sport, there were so many people who are like, oh my God, or they see us still training and they're like, you should compete, you should do this. Like they see, that we do have a lot of potential in the sport, which is correct. And, we still get that from time to time because we're still training at a really high level, but it's the cost. It's like the path towards being a competitive athlete in that sport. There's an enormous cost to it. And then from a multi-sport athlete now, because I admittedly do a lot more biking than running, but I still run. I raced and won a 10K over the summer. Like I still do that. It's in my training. But for me, I always kind of envision fitness as like a spider web diagram. So you have all these, how do we define fitness? And you can define fitness in a lot of ways, but if we're going to define it as like an all encompassing thing, running is one specific sort of type of fitness, like endurance, cycling kind of the same way, but you have strength, you have coordination, you have accuracy, you have mobility, you have all of these things that go into what makes a person fit. And, I like to be fairly well balanced. When I'm training hard with cycling or with running, it shifts a little bit. But I like to see how good can I get at what I'm trying to do without giving up a lot of mobility, without giving up, more than 5 to 10% on my strength, without dedicating all of my time to this one thing. And it means that you're leaving potential on the table. Because whenever you want, like, there's no high level runner out there who's doing strength training. Like, they're not, unless you're a sprinter. And even then, the strength training probably looks different. So you just kind of have to be okay with that. And for me, I'm like Alex, 100% okay with that. Leaving a little potential on the table, because for me, the juice is not worth the squeeze. And, I like to do a lot of different things, and running can make you great at running, but it comes at a cost to, some of the other stuff that I enjoy doing. So.
I want to highlight how impressive a 1:36 half marathon is with less than a week of preparation.
Yeah.
But I also want to point out something very interesting. This is kind of where I want to go next with this, is this concept of sport specific versus general fitness. And, when we're talking about adult recreational runners, right? We tend to be, and I say we because I am one of those, we tend to be very narrowly focused in our definition of what we think fitness is, and that we think fitness is entirely related to running volume, running pace, running all the things running. And when people say, this person just ran a race off of no training. And then my favorite is I always kind of dig in a little bit more and realize that they have an incredibly high level of overall fitness. They just didn't train specifically for that race. And another example of this that I just came across, they just did a big profile on Courtney DeWalter, trail running goat, but talking about her background growing up, and she ran like she was an all-American runner. Like she was a good athlete from very young. And I think sometimes when we think, well, these people came out of nowhere, well, maybe you just didn't know about them, but they were performing at a pretty high level before they broke onto the scene. So I just want to kind of expand on this idea of sport specific versus general fitness, and thinking about when our thinking about overemphasizing sport specific fitness can get us into trouble. And I know specifically really talking about people who are maybe more all in on running than they necessarily should be, especially if they have other goals like health and bone density.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing for most sports, but with running, running is actually really similar to cycling in a lot of ways, in that the things that impact the most, kind of the low hanging fruit from a performance standpoint, would be like low aerobic capacity, which is essentially like building the base, which actually doesn't require like an enormous amount of volume. It just requires a little consistency over time. Movement economy, so like running with relatively good form, which like a lot of people want to focus on that early on, and they're doing strides, or they're looking at their cadence, or they're trying to figure out like, well, how do I change the way that I run? And unless you have like egregious movement problems, the best way to improve how you run is to run. Like that kind of just starts to take care of itself. And everyone's sort of put together a little different. So the best way for one person to run is going to look slightly different than, the best way for another person to run, but it is something to pay attention to. And then outside of that, a little bit of intensity, but a lot of people sort of like bypass those things and start focusing on, the very nuanced training pieces, the weird interval stuff. And that alone is problematic, but also, kind of only focusing on this one very narrow sport, especially when it's a sport that's so specific, you're just introducing so much risk of injury. Like running it's a lot of this, like it's a very one plane movement. It does tend to come at a cost for mobility, especially with women. You see some pretty major shoulder restrictions develop over time. And that's partially like just the way that women are put together, but also just sort of a lack of upper body strength training just gets worse. And so if you do that for too long, it's really difficult to walk that back. Like if you run, from a kid or even like mid 20s into your 40s, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, the internet tells me I need to strength train, and I need to work on my upper body strength and all this stuff. Like it can be really hard to develop certain things once you're past a point. And that's why I think unless you're going out there to win Boston or something, a little bit of balanced strength and conditioning goes a long way in preventing those types of restrictions from showing up late in life. And then, like, again, we could talk about the bone density problem like until the cows come home. That's a real risk for people. And again, like running endurance sports increases that risk.
I don't think people realize as you just highlighted, the way that our bodies and tissues, movement patterns change specifically to support the things that we do the most. And an example I like to use is, let's say somebody's athletic and they're, running 5 days a week and they're hitting the gym, but the rest of the time they're sitting in their office chair hunched over like a little troll. Well, which movement pattern and the way that your body is, do you think it's the run? No, it's probably the way you are the other, 8 to 10 hours of the day probably plays a role here. But Alex, you said when you were, taking up strength training again from running a lot, like you felt that you're like, oh, okay, I can't, my mobility's gone and this hurts now.
Yeah, that was when I started CrossFit classes, and there's a big emphasis on squatting. And I hadn't squatted in quite a while because I was running so much at the end of university, and skiing kind of leads to tight hips because you're hunched over. It was a lot, and it just took a long time to get that mobility back. And I got it back by not doing mobility, by just doing more functional movement like squatting. And it's the same thing when I finish runs. Often I'll do my run in the morning and then I strength train in the afternoon. The first few squats, I'm like, oh, my knees really hurt. And then by the end of the session, I'm feeling so much better. And it's like what my mom said the other day, like motion is lotion. Like she's getting older and she does the same thing. And it's like, it might hurt at first, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Of course, there's like pain that you should get checked and not push through. And then there's joint pain because you're not moving your joints in different ways. I think to go back and answer, if you don't mind, the question about like the risks that runners or sports specific training specifically to running, I would say injury is high. The risk for injury is high. And I think the problem with runners that I see is that when you only run when you're injured, you just keep running because you don't have another alternative, because you're not familiar with other things in the gym that you can do, whether it's like, bike training or weight strength training or different things that, you have other options. Like I've had, been, I wouldn't say riddled with injuries, but I've had, nigglies along the way as is normal. And when my foot hurts, the answer is not to go run on my foot. It's to dial back, figure out what's going on, and maybe sub for biking. But it's really awesome that I'm comfortable on the bike and I know how to maintain my fitness and my aerobic capacity on the bike for a few weeks. I think a lot of runners just don't have that. And then from like a nutrition and weight standpoint, I think a lot of runners think that being lighter is better. And often they'll end up either not making it to the start line because they've not fueled properly throughout their training in an attempt to either get smaller or just unknowingly not eating enough or not eating even around or during runs. And so that can also lead to injury. So I would say it's that like, and I'm sure this has probably been a topic on your podcast more than once, but that like, it is better to get to the start line feeling healthy and get to the start line than, try to lose weight or try to be lighter to be faster and not make it to the start line because you haven't supported your training for many months. And that's so common with runners, unfortunately, and especially I think young female runners, you see that quite a bit.
Just the other day, I was having a conversation with a colleague, and like we were joking, but not joking, like joking in a very sad way, and talking about how this, was it 80% of runners experience an injury every year, and people are like somehow baffled by how this is happening. Like we know exactly why this is happening. You're doing too much, you're doing it too quickly, you're doing it too hard, and you're not eating enough to support it. Like it's not, that's why you get injured 99 times out of 100. It's not like we have this epidemic of unknown injury causes. Like we know why you keep getting injured. This is why.
Yeah. Or like what you said, you get up from 8 hours working at a desk and go out for your run. I'm like, that's not going to feel good. Or you're getting like 5 hours of sleep and also trying to recover from your runs day to day. And that's not good either. And not everyone has a perfect life where they can, revolve it around running, but all these little factors play a role.
So what about, somebody's listening to this episode out of curiosity and saying, that's cool, but all of those things that they just talked about, all those other sports, I only like to run. Everything else feels like pulling fingernails out of my hands. Like, you know, how far do you go in trying to introduce somebody to variety? Do you believe that there are some people who only love running and hate everything else? Or do you think they just maybe haven't tried the right different thing yet?
Probably both. I think both those groups of people exists. I think regardless of whether you like it or don't, you should strength train. I just think it's too important for longevity. And if, like we have to do a lot of things in life that we don't like or particularly enjoy. And, but we do it because there's value. And I think especially as we age, if you're, 30 or 40, maybe you don't see the value of strength training right now, but just like, you don't see the value of your the actual value of your bank account going up when you go to work, even if you don't want to. Down the line, when you're 60 or 70 and you haven't strength trained, that's when you see the real value in it. And so it's like you just do it because you know the benefit is going to be so great down the line. And then for people who just haven't tried the right thing, keep trying, and also give it time, because with strength training and just like running, it's a bit of a steep learning curve, and it's you can adapt very quickly at first. So you just stick with it. You start seeing the benefits. You start getting more comfortable with the movement. You start getting more comfortable with showing up at a gym and not just going to the treadmill. It's all those things. So it's just trying new things. And I always like, if you're unsure or you're susceptible to injury, then hire a coach. That's the best bet, the best bang for your buck. And I think some people think I don't need a coach because I'm a beginner. And it's like, well, those are the people who need the coaches the most. So.
Meredith, what about you? Do you think it's two different types of people? I think there really are people who only love running.
There probably are, yeah. And I think there are people out there who only love doing what they feel really competent and confident doing too, which is probably where some of that love for running comes from, because it's like, I know I can put my shoes on and go out the door. I know exactly what to do. I know what it's going to feel. It's very predictable. So it's this thing that's really constant where, walking into the gym and not knowing what to do can feel frustrating. It can feel like a waste of time. You can feel like, well, I would have had a way better workout if I had just gone to run. And like, that's something that we can respect for people who only have, an hour or two every day to do a workout. Like it is a real sacrifice to give that up, to do something that, number one, you're not going to be good at, and you're definitely not going to be good enough at it right away to really get anything from it. So you're going to have to do this buy-in period, where it's not going to do a whole lot for you other than like teach you how to do the thing. And so, there's that as well. But even with running, like we were having this conversation with someone last week, I can't remember who, but she switched to trail running from road running because she was finding road running to be really repetitive. And trail running, especially if you live anywhere with hills or mountains, that's a form of resistance training. Like, walking up a mountain, hiking up a mountain, that's a very, heavy load on the legs, especially if you're used to just doing sort of relatively flat road running. So you can get creative with even how your running looks in a way that takes, is at least a step towards a more balanced way of training. And, with trail running, with hiking, you can add load to that. And all of a sudden you're loading your legs in a totally different way, and you're building muscle and increasing, unilateral stability and stuff like that, because it's different strides. Like you're taking long strides, short strides, you're kind of doing the side to side. So there's different ways to move someone towards that like strength training place, even if they're not quite ready to, go into the gym.
Meredith, you said that play, is very important to you and has always been very important, this sense of the things you engage in, feeling playful and feeling like you're playing. And Alex, you said that when you were skiing or kind of committing to things, that you didn't necessarily feel like doing a thing that felt restrictive or felt like work, felt like obligation, felt like pressure. And I think that's kind of the same descriptor of wanting to do things that feel fun and don't feel like a chore. But I'm sure you know that we have a lot of people out there who, even if they start running or swimming or biking or even strength training and found the joy and the fun initially, at some point for a lot of people, it becomes this chore. and we really struggle to get back into it feeling, hey, this is supposed to be fun. Like, this is your hobby. This is your time to go enjoy yourself. Um, Alex, we'll start with you. Do you have any response to that for people who might be struggling with this, or something you've seen with any of the clients that you've worked with?
That's a tough one. I don't necessarily think everything should be fun.
I'm not, yes, no, I agree with you. It's not like I should be like, yeah, I get to go on my 5-mile run today. It's the most fun ever, but more like that's something that should feel generally, overall, like you enjoy it, that it's joyful, that so when you are doing it, it can, be engaging and bring you pleasure versus like, oh, I have to go for my run today. And I slog through my run and I get home and I'm like, did it, check that off, next.
Yeah. I think the answer there is look a little deeper as under like, why are you doing this? Because if you're running for health or you're training for another marathon and you're like, wait, no one has really asked me, and I haven't asked myself, like, do I even want to train for a marathon? Is it kind of to go back to looking at the process? Like, am I just thinking about crossing the finish line and getting a PR in that marathon? Or am I actually like looking at what the process is going to look like? And do I like training for marathons? No. And maybe the answer is then you shouldn't train for marathons. Maybe you do a half marathon, which can be very different training, or 10Ks, or maybe you switch to biking, or you do some other sort of movement for at least a period of time that maybe checks the box, and then you revisit strength training or running in the future, and maybe that love comes back. Looking at other factors in your life, like, are you living a very stressful time right now? Like maybe you have young kids, or you're struggling in your relationship, or you have a really stressful job. Like that can impact how you view hobbies outside of work in your life. So it's like, I think looking at the full picture can be really helpful, and also just kind of like taking pressure off yourself to explore and stay curious as to like what you want to do. But yeah, I think that's the big one. I do think that a lot of people that I work with, they struggle sometimes with training by themselves and getting to the gym. And a lot of us, I think when COVID happened, we switched to like training at home, and that can be super valuable for the person who's really, really motivated. But there's so many options now for group classes, like group strength classes, run clubs, whether they're remote or in person, like group Zwift rides. Like there's so many things that can help motivate somebody to get there. And then once you're there, it's not so bad. So I think there's like a lot of, that was a long-winded answer, but I think just looking at the full picture and then maybe finding ways just to make that thing a little bit more enjoyable, even if it's for a short period of time. But
Meredith, what about?
Sorry. Also, there are like weeks where like I really don't want to train, and I do it, and then like the next week I feel like very motivated to train again. So sometimes it's just like it's okay to have days where you're like, I don't really want to do this.
Sorry. Oh yeah, that's totally normal. I just always think it's interesting because, and Meredith, I do want to hear from you because you're the one who brought up, play and having fun and in the grand scheme of things with all this, but that it can feel like an obligation once it feels like, I'll use kind of an amalgamation as an example. Somebody starts running as an adult, right? Maybe in their, mid 30s, and they enjoy it and they run a couple half marathons, run a couple marathons, or a couple years down the road. And and it feels like they are kind of on a carousel that they can't get off because they feel like, again, those shoulds, I know we're the should word, watch your shoulds, that, oh, but I should continue to do this. This is who I am now. Like if I stop running, I will be a failure or a quitter or, something less than that. That's something when you tie your identity only being a runner or only being something, it can feel like you're never allowed to leave.
Yeah. Sorry, Meredith. I've had one person, we were building her up for a marathon, and she got sick and missed some runs, and she started feeling very stressed out about the fact that this marathon was approaching. And so we were talking, and I like this phrase, and it was like, is this going to be an opportunity for growth? And like just slogging through the marathon or like pursuing this goal, like what is it? What is the outcome? What does it get you? And the answer is like, nothing. I don't actually want to do it. And I think people, like you say, are really fearful of like dropping out or not doing something. But it's like, if it's not serving you, if the experience isn't going to serve you, then, are you doing it for someone else? No one cares. Like, and I think that's a really good point. And I think it's really important for people to really look at why they do certain things, because so many of us do things because we think other people want us to, or I don't know. And so it's just like, it's a good reality check.
Yeah. And, I don't want to repeat what Alex said, so I'll take a different angle. And that's one, when we look at high performers in any sort of space, you can certainly look at running. You can also look at, creatives, you can look at athletes, you can look at business people. Often what draws you into doing something can almost become a thing that, like, give it enough time and it sort of pushes you away, or it becomes very discouraging. And that just comes from a place of pressure. It's like what Alex was saying, like when that obligation starts to creep in, um, because it starts to feel like a job, or, maybe you're not a national level skier. Maybe you are just a recreational runner. You're always going to be a recreational runner. But like you said, you've kind of allowed your identity to merge with that. And so at first, maybe it was the identifying as a runner that really drew you in, because it got you into a community. It got you onto a routine. It built fitness. It gave you things to strive for. But that same thing that drew you to it at first becomes this thing that's really a source of pressure, and almost makes you want to stop doing it, or at least it takes the joy out of doing it. And so maybe at that point you see people plateau. They start skipping runs. They enjoy what they're doing less. And so finding a way to kind of re-engage with it. If you want to keep running, maybe it's, I'm not going to continue running marathons or half marathons. I've never actually trained for a 5K. Maybe I'm just going to train for a 5K. Maybe I'll get into trail running. Maybe I'll do some high rocks. Maybe I'll try Ragnar. Like finding different ways of doing the thing that you're doing with different communities and different expressions can be a way to re-engage. And then you don't know where those doors go. Like it could be that in training for a high rocks race or something that's very run heavy, you actually discover that you really like mixed modal training and strength and conditioning training. And then all of a sudden you've re-engaged with your fitness in a completely different way that you never would have been able to had you not, had the curiosity to explore some other options. But I think that we're almost like possums in a way, where like, if you shine a light in their face, they just kind of keep doing what it is that they were doing, because they're like, I don't know what my options are, so I'll just keep walking. And again, I think that oftentimes goes back to how limited our free time is, and how, busy people, they don't even because sometimes I feel this way. I'm like, I can't even take a moment to think about anything else. And I know that, like, doing research on high rocks, or like, what would I do if I wanted to train for a 5K? Like, that's more time. But it's so worth it if you're feeling sort of like, about what it is that you're doing. And that's for all training, but certainly with running, which just is very repetitive.
I want to talk about, as we are, nearing the end of our conversation, about the concept of balance. Because Meredith, you just said, right, we're busy, right? You have limited time. We've limited time. And the number one question that I get about strength training is not how to do and what to do, but it is when. How do I fit this in? How do I add this on top of all of the other things I'm already doing? Or they like to ski in the winter, or they like to paddleboard, or they like to play golf, and like to walk the course, and that's 4 hours every week. So it's like, how do I add all of these things in that I want to do and still keep balance? What are your thoughts on balance in this context?
Do you want to do that?
Don't all start at once.
Okay. It's hard because I live a completely different life than a lot of people. Like, I don't have kids. I have a very flexible job. So I have this, different, but I do work with enough people, I think, to have an understanding of what other people's lives look like. And I think it's, for starters, I think people run too much. I think from what I've seen of other programs, I think, and it's too much running, and they discount what you can get out of strength training and mixed modal training, and even playing golf and skiing, and that can contribute to being a better runner. Like if you're doing a strength training program that's like maybe just like super, super, super basic, and it's like, maybe, yeah, there's no value there. But if you're doing, intervals on an assault bike or intervals on a rower, and you're moving your body in different ways, that can really help your VO2 max and your aerobic capacity running. Or like if you're doing strength training, sure, maybe it makes you tired for your next run, but over time, having like way stronger legs is going to help you, run faster and have more power and that sort of thing. So it's like sometimes, it's balance. It's like taking away something and putting it somewhere else, and having better balance can improve the thing that you've actually taken time away from. That makes sense. And then I do think that things like golf, any sort of activity, I just think is great. Like golf is a low intensity aerobic activity. It's, maybe don't take a cart and walk with your clubs on your back. Like that is great for fitness. It's great for like your mental tenacity. Golf is I used to play golf competitively, and I understand like the value of that mental sport and that mental aspect to being a better runner. It's like staying in it. It's forgetting, you had one bad hole and you can reassess for the next one. I mean, I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, but I think balance is all about like, number one, making sure that you're spending time where you want to spend it. Because if you're wasting your time, that's just going to make you mad, and it's going to not make you not enjoy things that you do with your time.
I love that you brought that up about like, and we talked again, this kind of this concept of sport specific versus general fitness. And I get so many questions about, does this count towards my training? If I go for a hike, does that count? If I go for a swim, does that count? If I run on the treadmill instead of outside, does that count? I'm thinking like, count towards what? It all counts. It all counts.
Yeah.
It's just different things.
Yeah. I think there's this, I don't know, I'm not as into the programming theories now. But I think I see a lot of people who try to run they think they need to run 6 days a week to be any sort of runner or improve at all. And I think, if you're doing other forms of fitness or movement, if you're running programming is good, like 3 to 5 is enough. Like for a lot of people, 3 can be enough. I've known people to run, sub 4-hour marathons on 3 days of running, as long as it's intelligently programmed and you're doing other training that helps contribute. Like, and of course, everyone is different. It's very personal. But yeah, I think it is hard when you think training needs to look some way to get to your goal. And then what you end up doing, and I've done this, is you just pile everything on top. And then guess what? Like you're so tired for training, you're missing days, you feel like crap during it, you start resenting running or whatever you're training for. It's just like piling it on top is not the answer. I've been there, I've done that. Like I'm doing half Ironman training, and it's like, instead of just keeping the same amount of running and adding on biking and swimming, which is kind of what I thought I would do, I've dropped back my running drastically. And it's nice because like nothing is going anywhere with my running. It's still improving, and it's almost because I'm able to focus more on my sessions. And then you get something out of the biking and the swimming, which is low intensity and low impact. So that's my answer. Again, very long-winded.
No, it's good. We have a real problem in our society with doing less, even if it's to our benefit. Meredith, what are your thoughts on balance in this context?
Well, I think first of all, you qualified for Boston on like 3 days of running a week, right? Yeah. So I think
but then it's what you said, like I have that my training history is extremely high.
Right.
But people always think about when they hear runners, when they hear that, they think you were running 3 days a week and sitting on your butt the rest of the time. Like you can train for things in a lot of different ways, but you can't really shortcut the endurance volume required for endurance sport, even if it's not all running.
Yeah, exactly. But the mixed modality approach definitely works for running, and it certainly reduces injury, which we've already talked about. With regards to balance, especially with strength training and adding that in, since that's the example you brought up, it's the thing that people like about running, and this is the thing that we like about running, is it's easy to do. You step out your door and you do it, and you can do it anywhere. You can do it on vacation. It's great. A lot of times when we start talking about strength training, now you're asking someone to get in their car and drive to a gym. And so you kind of want to think about, well, what are the limitations? What are my personal limiters with strength training? Lack of knowledge, obviously, but you can fix that really easily by hiring someone or getting on a program. And then it becomes physical limitations. So like, where's the closest gym? Maybe the gym that you like to go to is 40 minutes away, but maybe there's a gym that you don't like as much, but it's only like 15 minutes away. So you go to the one that's 15 minutes away. That's like a no-brainer. So you make doing that a little bit easier. And then I like truly believe, and I know like it's a little bit privileged for us to have like the gym setup that we have, but you don't have to have like a full-blown CrossFit kind of gym in your house to get a lot of value out of some gym equipment. So I truly believe that people get so much out of a small investment into a home gym. You buy, one rubber mat, you buy a bench, you buy a set of dumbbells, maybe you buy a rack with a barbell so you can do some barbell work. You can get a pretty decent setup, even used on Facebook, for a very small investment. And now it's in your house. So you don't have to worry about getting in your car when it's cold and going to the gym. It's somewhere in your house. And it doesn't have to be a complicated program. It doesn't have to be long. You don't need to do these bodybuilding programs with like 12 different pieces a day, just like a couple of compound movements a week in the 16 to 32 rep range, relatively heavy. That works wonders for people. And then accessory movements that support hip health and running specific injury prevention can work really well. And it can be so easy. It doesn't need to be complicated. So I think balance starts to feel a lot easier when you make it easier to win at whatever it is you're trying to do. And then you just make it as simple and basic as you possibly can.
That's the part I think a lot of people struggle with. We all struggle with. We like to overcomplicate things. We like to make things fancy because we think fancy is better. And then we end up in this weird, I've overcomplicated it to the point where now I'm paralyzed and I don't know what to do.
Yep. I think some people, they're like, okay, I'm going to add strength. And they're like, hey, I'm going to look at a program. Well, this program's 5 days and I run 5 days. So now I have to do 10 sessions in a week. Okay, but you don't need to do that. Like I think another trick is incrementally adding. So even if you're just running right now and it's 5 days a week, maybe drop that down to 4 and add one strength training day, and believe that one strength training day is going to make a difference, even if it means that eventually you got to add 2. But one strength training day a week is better than 0. It really is. It's like one run per week is better than 0. But some people think it's all or nothing, but it's just not true. That's not the truth.
Well, I cannot thank you both enough for being here today for this conversation. What do you guys, it's January. What's on your calendar for 2025? Any fun events, any races on the horizon?
So many,
mostly bike races. But I think we have Calgary Marathon coming up in May. That'll be the first one, I think. That's going to be an Alex thing. And then a variety of bike races. Yeah.
She's doing a 200-mile bike race, gravel bike race.
Ooh.
She's doing Leadville, which is 100 miles mountain bike.
And then maybe Sea Otter, that one would be in April. Rebecca's, which will be in September. And then some local ones around here. So
fun.
And then we're doing, the one that's actually going to be the most fun is called Tears and Gears. And it's an event in Fernie, where we live. And you can do it individually, but we're going to do it as a team. So basically one person does a biking leg and then one person does the running leg. And I don't want to call our shot, but I think we could win that.
I did suggest for a minute we do it individually and we race, but we've learned over the years that racing each other is not good for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Work together, not separately.
100%.
So how is it? So is it like it's a 2 legs? So there's a biking and a running component.
Yeah. So it's like a cross country mountain bike, the trail ride, obviously, and then a 10K-ish trail run. So basically your biker comes in and then your runner takes off. Or if you're doing it solo, you would do the bike leg and then take off on the run. But
that's so cool. There need to be more biking. Like, is that technically
duathlon?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There need to be more of those. Because it's, as we talked about earlier in the episode, even when swimming, even if it's your most favorite thing in the whole world, it's kind of hard logistically to swim, but it's much easier to run and bike.
Yeah, 100%.
Super cool. Well, I can't wait to see what this year brings you. Anyways, I want to, again, thank you so much. I'm such huge fans of you and your work and all the things that you talk about and the joy and light and realism that you bring to, I think, the active world in general. But for people who don't know how to find you, please tell us where they can do that.
Sure. So our business page is at Tactic Nutrition on Instagram. And then our website for nutrition coaching, and then it's connected to our fitness coaching, is tacticmethod.com. And then Tactic Works Out is our secondary website. And then my Instagram page is AAParker1. And Meredith's Instagram page is...
You don't have it memorized?
Meredith.root.
No.
Meredith_root. It's Meredith_root.
And that's going to be linked in the show notes. Don't worry. The correct ones, don't worry.
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. And I hope we get to stay in touch.
Yep.
Likewise.
You're welcome.